Well, hello everyone. We're going to wait just a couple minutes because I know we're going to have people kind of popping in for the next few minutes, and I want to give them a chance to come on in. But we're excited that you're all here with us tonight. And yeah, so we'll be going over a few things in just a few moments. Alrighty, well, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I just want to say bonjour, good evening. My name is Laura Newton, and I am the Indian Child Welfare and Indigenous Women's LifeNet Program Director at the Minneapolis American Indian Center. And I'm really glad to see that we've got a large attendance tonight. We are also on Facebook Live tonight, so I know that we have viewers from that avenue as well. And we have the MUID coordinator who is monitoring the Facebook Live right now. And so if at any time you have questions, you can type into the comment section there. If you have questions and you are watching on Zoom, you can type those questions into the chat section. And if you have questions about that or need to know, something more, you can, like I said, you can go onto Facebook too. So I wanted to take some time right now. I'm just going to actually introduce a few things that we're going to be doing tonight and talk a little bit about just some of the Zoom rules that we have and our Zoom guidelines for tonight. And just to let you know kind of what the agenda is. So this evening we're going to be talking about transfer legal custody and also just different types of permanency and ways that families can care for American Indian children, and just different things that those of us that have been involved in child welfare have kind of heard or have been asked as questions over the years. Like I said, we will be having a panelist group coming on in a little bit. We will start with our speakers here at 6:15. There's going to be a Q&A section in Zoom. So you'll see that there is like a chat or the Q&A. You can ask questions at any time in that, and they'll be forwarded to me as the moderator. And then I will take time. So if we don't answer it immediately, we will get to it as soon as there is time that allows for the speaker to be able to ask or interrupt and ask a question. Some of the things that we are going to be talking about tonight is just some of the myths and then also the facts that surround what transfer legal custody is. What are the different types of permanency, or what are the different types of options that families might have when they are looking to care for a relative or a foster child. We also will be talking a little bit about what are some of the things that happen prior to a child welfare, child protection case opening? What are some ways that families can help each other by caring, for siblings or grandchildren or nieces or nephews? So we're going to be talking a little bit about that as well. And then hopefully we're going to be answering some of your questions. Like I said, those things are, again, monitored in the Zoom as well as in the Facebook Live. So please comment. So I think now I'm going to get started. I'm going to actually just introduce our speakers first, and then I will introduce our panels when we get ready to start our panel. So right now we have with us today, our speakers are Shannon Smith from the Indian Child Welfare Law Center, and Jacqueline Bolio, who is with us from the Hennepin County Attorney's Office. And I will turn it over to them now to tell you a little bit more about what they do and talk about transfer of legal custody and some of the myths and some of the things that you can learn regarding the law. Thanks.
I guess we didn't talk about who was going to go first.
I know.
you, Jacqueline.
The best laid plans. I guess I can sort of introduce myself first. I'm currently with the Hennepin County Attorney's Office. I've been there about 2.5 years. I used to work with Shannon at the ICWA Law Center for about 14.5 years. So I have been doing this for quite some time. But now just doing it on sort of the other side of the table. But definitely have seen these different scenarios play out, certainly in all sorts of different ways. But I will turn it over to Shannon to introduce herself and sort of introduce the Law Center.
Hi, good evening, everyone, and thank you. I'm really hopeful my house will be quiet. I have 4 teenagers, and they do everything they can to ignore me, except for some reason tonight. They keep on coming in. I have no idea. So, but hopefully, it's worse than toddlers, I think. My name is Shannon Smith, and I've been at the ICWA Law Center for just over 20 years. The ICWA Law Center has been around since 1993, and we provide direct legal representation to families who are impacted by the Indian Child Welfare Act. Shauna King, who is on tonight as well, is one of our parent mentors. The idea of what we hope at the ICWA Law Center is that we can provide kind of a multidisciplinary team that we can work together in order to provide families with information and a voice in regards to proceedings that impact their children. And as part of that, we represent families from sometimes even before child protection involvement, and then all the way through the conclusion of a case. And sometimes when, for whatever reason, children can't be reunified or aren't reunified with their parents, we help facilitate different kinds of permanency options, transfer legal custody, and at times adoptions. So I look forward to connecting with you all tonight. I certainly wish we were doing this in person, but I recognize that having an opportunity, even if it's not in person, is really important. So I appreciate you all being a part of this.
Okay, so the first thing that we're going to talk about is adoptions, which in ICWA cases is not something that happens very often because generally tribes don't support, generally tribes are not supportive of adoptions, but adoptions is one of the permanency options, which would involve a termination of parental rights, of the parent's parental rights, and then an adoptive family stepping forward and asking to adopt the children. There are a couple different options. I'll talk briefly about the state court option, which would be the termination of parental rights and an adoption that would follow that. As far as sort of biological parents' rights following that, it is meant to terminate rights, and so that's not usually something that happens. There is a possibility to have a contact agreement. You say if there's, if it's like a relative or something, and they, are open to having ongoing contact, that is definitely, it's basically an agreement, a contract that can be written up that would get entered at the time of the adoption to give the parent a right to ongoing contact or updates regarding the child following an adoption, but that isn't something that that normally happens with a regular adoption. As I indicated, in ICWA cases, it's not something that happens a lot because in ICWA cases you need qualified expert witness testimony from the tribe supporting that, and tribes really do try to keep families, parents involved and having contact with their children if that's at all possible. Shannon, do you want to talk about tribal court customaries?
Yes. So the Indian Child Welfare Act was passed in 1978, and I think one of the things that I think probably most of us recognize, but I don't think it's said enough, is that it is really the whole idea of the Indian Child Welfare Act is based on tribal sovereignty. And so one of the things that the Indian Child Welfare Act indicates is that there really is a presumption that cases or situations involving Indian children, if at all possible, should be heard in tribal court. And I think one of the things we see so many cases in state court that we kind of, that presumption, while we know it's there, we don't name it a lot because we're practicing in state court. But I think one of the things that, if anyone's had an opportunity to be a part of a customary adoption, it's something that's unique to tribal court, unique to tribal codes. So not every tribal code includes customary adoptions, but for example, the White Earth Tribal Code does. And the idea and the thought and the process is that it's not taking away or not acting like that connection between mom and child never existed. It's really making the circle broader, bringing more people into that child's life in order to protect that child and make sure that that child is in a safe place, while also acknowledging that that connection between mom and child is something that has inherent value because of where the child came from. And so I think it's some of the thing, I think sometimes the frustration, and I will say even, practicing the law and doing it for quite a long time, one of the things that sometimes is hard is that the law doesn't match the real experience. So the law is telling us that we have to do things or talk about things in a way that sometimes doesn't acknowledge the relationship or the connections. And tribal court, customary adoption is one kind of permanency option. One thing that tribal court uniquely does that I think more kind of embraces what the experience of the family may be in a way that's unique and in a way that state court hasn't been able to because there's just not the language to do it. And I think it's kind of as simple as that. We like things in state court are, or the termination of parental rights is like this really, bold, and we're going to take this away, doesn't understand how you can add something without like actually replacing it. In tribal courts, like we can widen the circle and we can make this in a different way. So there are different ways to kind of talk about how to keep children safe and how to acknowledge connections that are really important, even if those connections at this moment in time are not connections that are maybe in the best way, but talks about ways of like being able to heal and recognize that those connections meant something at one time. And because of that, they're worth holding on to, and with the hope that they can be healed and fixed.
Sorry about that. I did something that I sort of left out that came up as a question, and I'm happy to address it now. If there's an adoption in state court, ICWA would still apply during that. And so the placement preferences for an adoption for an Indian child would still be the same. It would be either with family or with another tribal member or with another Native person from a different tribe. So those, that follows a child through the entire process. And if a child is being adopted, the biological parents aren't entitled to notice of those proceedings, but any relatives do get notice of that happening. And so the state is absolutely required to look for relatives and try to place children with relatives and provide relatives notice of adoption proceedings so that, if they were somebody that wanted to, to be considered or something, that then they would be considered. And I think Shannon and I have been doing this a long time, and I think sometimes we skip over things, but what I kind of forgot to say is that obviously if you're looking at like a customary and tribal court, that would require the case being transferred to tribal court, and that can happen during the initial child protection phase. It can happen during a permanency phase as well if a tribe is looking to do something that isn't, just simply isn't available through state law, like the customary adoption. That is something that can really happen at any time. And that's something that, the tribes always have the right to do that, to have cases involving their children transferred to their own tribal courts. I think the next thing that we wanted to talk about was transfers of custody, which I think a lot of people, which I think is far more common when you were talking about ICWA cases, because it does not.
Yeah, I was just
Sorry.
I just wanted
Go
to
ahead.
add one thing in regards to the adoption that just popped into my mind, is really the importance if you are in a position where you are wanting or holding yourself out as a placement option, or somewhere where a child, you know, you have, let's say you have a niece or nephew, a grandchild in placement, and you want to be an adoptive resource, and there's already been a termination of parental rights, that parent is not going to be getting any information. So it is so important that if you are someone who says, you know what, I want my relative to be with me and this is the best place, that you are persistent. And I say that with, I think that's a really hard thing to say when a family is hurting and when there's a child and, you know, why aren't they coming to me and saying this is happening? But I think it's really important that, you know, that you hold yourself out, because too often, for whatever reason, people, you know, will be like, I didn't know this was going on, or I didn't know there was a hearing today, or I don't know what to do, or I don't know what to talk to. So persistence or talking to tribal reps or other individuals involved and letting them know that you're there is so important. And I think that it's sometimes not thought of as, that it's frustrating that that's the way that it has to be. But I want to make sure that everyone knows that it really can make a significant difference. You know, showing up at a court hearing or having a conversation or maybe calling someone back, even though they haven't called you back, all can just make a significant difference. And it's, you know, I don't want to say it's the way it should be, but I think it's important to note that that can have an impact.
I guess, and I would add to that, a lot of times people might not be in a position right now today to take that child, but I would always say not right now rather than no, because then the people and, you know, who are looking to place that child know to kind of circle back to you. So maybe you're not in a great position now, you're moving or whatever is going on. You know, the department, at least under state law, is required to also maintain connections. And so even if you were to be maybe, you know, in 6 months, you could be a placement option or something. Like, don't, so many times I think people might say no because right at that very minute they can't do it. But if you know, think down the road you can, they might not circle back. And it's important to sort of, you know, sort of raise that hand up and be like, yes, you know, this is something I could consider maybe down the road, just so you're not, so you're not getting, you know, left out of important decisions regarding one of your relatives' children or something. So with respect to transfers legal custody, I was going to talk a little bit about from the custodian perspective. So if you're maybe if you're a foster parent and you're caring for a child, whether it's a relative or not, and, you know, the parent has been working on a case plan or maybe hasn't been working on a case plan, and they're looking at permanency and they're asking you to take custody of that child. You know, one thing that, I guess it's several things that are important to know, but one is that, you know, the parents' rights are not terminated, and they will have an ongoing right to have parenting time and visitation with that child or children. That's, you know, certainly something to consider, because the county won't be involved, you know, having visit supervisors and transportation and all of that thing. So I think that's important, you know, to realize that you know, be able to navigate that afterwards. Financially, what happens after a transfer of custody, it's not the same as foster care. I think in 2015, it changed from relative care assistance to North Star kinship benefit assistance. And you do need to be a licensed foster provider in order to be eligible for that. And then I believe the amounts have risen since it was relative custody assistance, but it's still not a tremendous amount of money that, and I don't think it's as much as foster care. One thing you do continue to get, medical assistance. If the child is eligible through 4E funding, you would have to apply for MNsure if they weren't eligible for that. And that, I think one thing that certainly the court is looking at is that, if you're taking custody of a 2-year-old, this is expected to be, until they turn 18, until they reach the age of majority. Certainly there are ways that parents can petition the court and get their rights back, but that is something that they do have to petition the court to do. It is a very high standard if the parent needs to show that they're in a better place. And if you're not in agreement with it, it is extremely difficult to do for them to get custody back. So, certainly I think if you're a grandparent and you're caring for your grandchildren, more than likely you want your children to get back on their feet and to regain custody. But sometimes if you're a non-relative foster provider, when you're attached to a child, you might not want to return custody. But that, those are things that can be motions that can be made down the road, but you do have to go back to court and you do have to provide the county that it took place in. You have to provide them notice of that anytime that, a transfer is done through a child protection proceeding. That would have to happen. I think one thing that I have learned since sort of coming over to the county side is that, relatives that are taking care of their children, they want to make sure that it stays. And so I, will talk to custodians or proposed custodians about any questions they have. And I think they're usually hesitant to ask questions or to seem like, or maybe if they ask a question that it's going to seem like they don't want to keep the children or something like that. And I think it's just very important to ask all the questions that you have from the workers that, that you're working with the department, because, we want people going into this knowing all of the facts and knowing all of the sort of the limitations and all of the hardships that you may have, because we want to make sure that kids are safe and well taken care of. And having custodians that all of a sudden a week after a transfer of custody are like, oh my gosh, what have I gotten into? So if it's if you're nervous because it's the the county and the government, ask someone else. Ask your licensing, if you're licensed through AFAX, ask them, or ask your tribal rep, or ask the person from the law center. Just make sure that you have those questions answered, so you know what you're getting into, and that's much clearer for both you and for the parents as well, that everyone knows, that everyone is on the same page with the information when going into something like this. Thank you.
Thanks, Jacqueline. One of the things I think how I'm going to kind of talk through this is kind of the conversations that I have with someone that I'm representing when we're at a point, or where it's at a point of a transfer of legal custody. I think one of the things that is really important to know, and I think a lot of times once we're in court, we assume that people recognize this, but I think it's important to know that there's two different kinds of custody, really. There's the legal custody and the physical custody. And the legal custody is all about the kind of decisions that are going to be made for that child. So things like education, medical, religious or cultural events, kind of what kind of decisions that are made on behalf of that child. The physical is really where that child is sleeping at night, where they're going home to, where they're at as physical. So there's kind of those two different things I think are really important. And when we're in a child protection proceeding, oftentimes I think they feel like they kind of all get put together, because we talk about a transfer of legal custody, and it's really a transfer of legal and physical custody. When I'm representing a parent and I'm talking to them about, like, for example, the possibility of a transfer of legal custody maybe to their mom, so the grandma to the children, one of the things that I always want to kind of put it in the context of, and this might seem like a really strange thing, but I think to me it's helpful to kind of think about it, is almost as if they were married, right? Like if you have a mom and a dad that were married, and then there's a divorce and there's a decision being made in regards to where those kids are going to live, maybe how decisions are going to be made going into the future. But it's not, when a divorce happens typically, and I know that there's exceptions, but typically it's not a decision about whether or not someone should be a parent or not, right? There's a recognition that both are parents. It's just in regards to how things are best going to move forward to make sure that the children stay connected to both parents, but that they also have all of their needs met. And so I often talk to, if I'm representing mom, we typically represent moms, but we also might be representing a legal custodian, a child, or, grandma. We represent a lot of different people, but the majority of the people we're representing is moms. So if I'm talking to mom and I'm representing her, I'll have that conversation. Like it's almost like you were married to this person, and now a decision is being made about how to make sure that you stay connected to your child, but also recognizing that maybe at this time it's not best that they live with you full time, or at least that's what, kind of people are indicating because of the concerns. So there's that. The other piece of it I often talk about is that the county is stepping out, and kind of as the county is stepping out, that someone else is stepping in. And so in a sense, you're transferring kind of the role that you had, the decision-making that you had, to someone else. And so in a way, you're giving them some sort of like power and control in a way. So you have to trust that the person that you're agreeing should be making these decisions on behalf of your child, the person that you're agreeing is going to care and protect for your child, is someone that you trust, if it's going to be something that's done voluntary. So we have, those kind of conversations. And then also, I think the one thing that does not get talked about enough is that when these decisions are being made, and when we're talking about, whether it be a termination of parental rights, or we're talking about a transfer of legal custody, and I think a transfer of legal custody, that this is a really important decision in regards to what the children's is going to be like, how they're going to be able to, move forward in a good way, how the family's going to be able to heal. But a lot of the people that are part of like leading up to this really important decision, once that decision is made, are no longer part of the child's life and no longer a part of the family's life. And I think that is the part that can be really difficult. So the fact that, when the court process is going on, you have the county, so you have a social worker, you have a guardian ad litem, you have attorneys involved, you have maybe different service providers involved. And at the point that the transfer of legal custody happens, those individuals are not going to be a part of what's going on anymore, in all likelihood. There's some exceptions to that, but, for the most part, it's going to be the family working together to try to move forward and try to figure out how this new relationship is going to work. And so one of the things that's really important is, what is the contact between, for example, mom and child going to look like when child is now in the custody of grandma? And that's really up for the family to decide. I mean, grandma is going to then be responsible to make sure the child is safe and that their needs are met. But mom also has a right to have that contact. And sometimes that is, the family works it out in a really, it's not difficult for them because it's maybe a part of the relationship that they've had before. Sometimes because of everything that has gone on and led up to the point of this transfer happening, that time can be incredibly difficult because mom might not be in a good place still, right? Maybe there's concerns in regards to use. Maybe there's concerns in regards to mental health issues that haven't been addressed. Maybe there's concerns in regards to, violence that mom has experienced or been a part of. And so like there's all kinds of different things that are going on. And so I think it's really important to to talk about those things at the time of the transfer. Not that they necessarily need to be all solved, but that there's a plan in place to figure out mom will have a right to visitation. The custodian has a responsibility to make sure that that contact happens in a safe way for the child. And so I think those are kind of some of the really real conversations that are really important. I think the other piece of it, you know, kind of, and Jacqueline touched on this, that transfer legal custodies by, you know, by definition, legal definition, are considered permanent. I'm not a huge fan of how permanent is used in the law, because I think it's it leads to some kind of difficult ideas. That being said, that if this transfer legal custody, if things stay, you know, if it happens when the child is 8 and the family is not back in court and things don't change legally, that grandma or whoever becomes the custodian is responsible for making sure that child is safe until they're 18. So, you know, it's a long time, and it's something that's a really significant decision. I think on a really positive note, it also transfer legal custody in a way that is different from adoption does allow for the possibility of hope and healing, that the family can change things if they want to with court involvement, or they can certainly expand visitation or the contact, and it's really up to the family to decide, as long as the custodian knows that they're responsible for, you know, for making decisions to keep that child safe. And if at some point in the future it does make sense for a transfer to happen again, if there's notice to the county and you know, circumstances have changed, that there is a possibility of getting custody back. It's just not something that is automatic, and certainly something that is not at all easy if there's not agreement of the family.
Right. And I think there was the other thing I kind of wanted to add to that, sort of for the custodians, for any proposed custodians. Usually, I would say most of the time, if we get to the point of a transfer of legal custody, you know, it's been determined that at this point in time, the child can't safely be with the parents. It's usually more of a, you know, supervised visit type of situation. You know, and the proposed custodian is responsible to figure out how that will be. If you know, want to meet at a park and have them over, or meet at McDonald's, or whatever that may be. But that's not to say that that can't change. So just like, you know, if I want to have my child go and spend the weekend with some cousins, you know, if the parents are in a better place and you know, think that they can safely have, you know, an overnight visit or things like that, that is something that you have the ability to do. It's not something that you would need to go back to court, you know, to expand, to allow the parent to have more time. So the flip of that is, obviously you can't say, you know, 6 months later, you can't just say, oh, mom's doing great, and so we're going to give, you know, kid can live with mom now. So anyway, so that is just something I kind of wanted to add. I think I had seen a question as well about name change and sort of different things and visitation for transfer of custody. I think the name change part, I think under Minnesota law, you need to still provide notice of a name change for a child who's under 18 to the legal parents. And so the parents would still have a right to get notice for that. I have always been sort of hesitant to try to get very specific in transfer legal custody orders regarding visitation, because a lot of the times the parent is not in a great place at the time that it takes place. And, you know, today they might need supervised visits, but in 90 days, if they've gone through treatment, you might feel okay with them having unsupervised visits or having a weekend or something. And so, you know, we generally write them vague sort of on purpose, because we're trusting the custodian that they will know what's in the best interest of that child and keep their safety keep their safety in mind, but also the fact that they need to have a relationship with their parents, and that is also in their best interest to maintain that relationship. I think we were going to talk about some of sort of the myths or concerns that often come up with custodians after a transfer of custody. I think we talked about most of it. It's just that obviously the custodian would need to continue to provide that visitation to the parent as long as it's safe and appropriate. Certainly can limit that to make sure that a parent is sober. That, if they were in a domestic violence situation, you can certainly limit it to not have the abusive partner around, things like that are related to safety. You absolutely cannot just say, no, you're not going to have any, time with your children, because they do maintain that right to visitation. As far as other people who are involved with the children's life, they don't have any enforceable rights for visitation. Grandparents or other family members would really need to participate in the visitation that the parent has, because that's the only person that through the transfer of custody still maintains that right to have enforceable visitation.
Along those lines, a couple of questions as far as being able to say like visitation should happen or parenting time should happen on a specific day. Absolutely, that's a possibility. I think the other question that came up is, in regards to the kind of how visitation can look or should look, is really dependent on the family and dependent on the relationship between the custodian and the parent. So for example, if a transfer of legal custody, let's say, happened a year ago, and mom is now in a place where she's doing exceptionally well, or just she's doing okay, and things are going well, and there's a positive relationship between the custodian and mom, absolutely it would be appropriate to say, if the custodian feels like the child will be safe, to make the decision that the child can spend a week during Christmas, or can spend a weekend, or can spend 2 weeks during the summer, or can go over there every Wednesday and the weekend. It's really up to the family as things evolve. And so that's the piece of like permanency where I get a little squirmish. Like there's very few things that have to stay in one place, right? And so we know that people heal, we know people change, we know that children maybe as they get older need something different, or maybe the relationship has changed, and it's okay for the family, for the custodian and the parent to work together. As long as the custodian's like, yeah, this child is going to be safe. It's really, there's, and I don't want to take it lightly in regards to how much responsibility is really placed on that custodian, in regards to really trying to figure out how this should look for the child, and how to keep the child in the best place that they're able to. And the court can give a little bit of direction, right? Like there's things, like you can't just say a parent can't have any contact. That's, typically not okay. Unless there's a court order saying like it's too dangerous or whatever. Sometimes those situations happen, but it really, in the best of situations, a transfer of legal custody really should give the family an opportunity to kind of evolve and move and change as things and life happens, in a way to make sure that that child is surrounded and protected, and the county's not going to be involved. And so it's really up to the family. But it's also not okay for the custodian just to say, okay, it's time to go to mom, without first going into court and saying, look, there's a change of custody. Because what happens if in situations like that, like grandma says, you know what, this just makes complete sense for child to be returned to mom. Mom's in a place where this, I want to be grandma, and mom's in a place where she can care for the child. And something happens, the responsibility is then going to fall on grandma if it has not come back to court and the court shifting custody. So it's really important to recognize that you can't just change custody back, but there is an opportunity if it makes sense, but there's also the opportunity for the family to move forward and to create contact or protect contact or heal the contact as needed for the children through a transfer of custody.
Okay, and I'll just kind of really quickly talk about sort of financial stuff after a transfer of custody. The funding mechanism right now is the North Star funding through the state, through DHS. And that does require that you are a licensed foster home and that the child has been placed with you as a licensed foster parent for 6 months. And so, you know, if the kid's been with you a year, but it took you, 8 months to get licensed, that's still not enough. And that, I think they made that change because they wanted to make sure that children, were in homes and were doing well in those homes, and that we wouldn't have, transfer of custodies have those fall apart after a child went to a home. So we want to make sure that kids are stable in those homes. And so that, I think sometimes it can be very difficult financially for especially, working parents like grandparents, especially if it's a small child. The amount of money that they get is obviously daycare is extremely expensive. It doesn't necessarily cover all of that, but that's what it is. And so unfortunately, those are the levels that, that DHS has decided children get, and actually the older kids get, the older kids get actually the amount of their benefit goes up. And I think that's based on that sometimes older kids, teens can be a little bit harder to place. But other than that, again, I would just reiterate, like if you are a potential custodian and looking at taking a transfer of custody, just be sure to really talk to the workers about the North Star and about the benefits and about, insurance or daycare, any of those things that you have questions about, because those are the really hard things that are involved day to day in taking care of kids, and the county will be gone once that order is signed. And so it's really important that you make sure that you know all those things.
Thank you, Jacqueline. I always get like glassy-eyed when North Star comes up because I think it's a very important piece of it, but it can also be confusing. So it's awesome to hear someone who knows the knowledge of that. Couple of really good questions that I know have been asked to me just privately, I think. Well, I don't know. It doesn't matter. So one of them is in regards to ICWA applicability. ICWA does apply to transference legal custody, like if it's out of a child protection case. So if you have an underlying or a CHIPS case that starts as ICWA, ICWA does apply to transfer legal custody, but it also applies in family court. So if there's a situation where there's a third party, so like someone other than mom or dad is going into family court and saying that I want custody of this child for whatever reason and child protection is not involved, ICWA does apply, and that can be a complicated process because the county's not involved and there's questions in regards to tribal involvement and active efforts. So I think the important thing to know is that it is involved, and that, if you're involved in a family court proceeding where there's third-party custody and an Indian child is involved, you are going to want to talk to someone and make sure that that is done right, because it can be a complicated process. And it's really important that that it is done. That is an area where we see quite a few cases get really confusing and messed up. So yeah, so certainly if that is something that you encounter or are considering, I would strongly recommend talking to an advocate, an attorney, to help you walk through that process, so that you don't end up just end up in a mess with that. So. And
the other, I think we were gonna touch on, I think in in years past, prior to North Star, I think parents had sometimes looked at maybe sharing custody with a proposed custodian. And that unfortunately is not something that the person would not be eligible for the benefit, the North Star benefit, if that happened. I think sometimes that was a situation where maybe if, you know, it's like a mom and she wants to share custody with grandma, but then that benefit wouldn't be available. And I think, and certainly transfers of custody can be done without financial benefits. Generally, we don't do those at the county because we like to, I mean, usually people need some assistance, especially if it's a small child. You know, we want to make sure that they're able to take care of that child. And so we usually try to avoid that, but certainly legally they can take place, but otherwise you need to follow the North Star stuff. Shannon, do you want to talk a little bit about if a parent wants to regain custody and sort of some of the myths about that?
Sure. So, and just kind of, first of all, in regards to what Jacqueline was saying, it's too, that it is possible that physical and legal custody can be shared in like a family court setting. So there are some possibilities. It's the funding piece. I think the other kind of question about North Star, and I don't know that there's actually an absolutely clear answer, but if, for example, mom is in a place where she wants to move in maybe with grandma and grandma's a legal custodian, again, that's something that you're going to want to talk to someone about and try to figure out how that may impact benefits. I think one of the things, kind of the biggest, like, I think frustration maybe of parents, or what parents sometimes hear in the process, is the idea that if they do a transfer legal custody, and if they work really hard and their life is on a much, you know, maybe a path of where they have stability and things are going well, that in 2 years they can automatically just get custody back. And that's often, you know, some of the calls and some of the frustration that we hear. The reality is it's much more difficult than that. You can ask for what's called like a modification of custody in 2 years. And if grandma and mom, you know, grandma as legal custodian and mom agree on it, they have to give notice to the county. But if the legal custodian is saying, yes, I think this is best, and this is a safe, you know, the best thing for this child, and it makes sense for us as a family, and we have a plan, you know, there's some likelihood that that's going to happen. What more frequently, I think the frustration is that if grandma, for example, is saying, you know what, like, you've done great work, and, you know, and I appreciate the fact that things maybe are better for you, but I want custody, I want to continue to have custody. Like, I accepted this and I took this on, and it's my intent to continue to be the legal custodian of the kids. And that tension, that family tension, and I think the really difficult piece for a parent at that point is the presumption is that the children should stay with grandma then. If grandma's not agreeing to it, and even if mom is doing really well and children are doing really well with grandma, the presumption is the children are going to stay with grandma. And so in order to kind of overcome that presumption, mom then has to indicate or show, like, has the burden of showing that things aren't really going well in the grandma's home, and that there's endangerment, for example. And so it's one of those things that legally, I think it works fine if everyone agrees, right? But if there's not that agreement, it puts families in a really hard place where they start the you know, the tension and trying to kind of overcome that can be really difficult. And the legal custodian is in the best legal position in order to continue that custody if there's not an agreement otherwise. And so a lot of times that 2-year thing, I think, gets stuck in someone's head, and they think, well, if I do everything that I need to do, it's going to be an automatic return to custody to me. And that's legally, that is not accurate.
Right, and I think, Laura, I think we're coming right up on the end of our time. I don't know if you want to, I see a question in the chat. I'm not sure if you want us to address that or if you want to move along to the panel.
I think if you could address that question in the chat, that last one that came up, I
Sure.
think we've addressed pretty much all of the other ones. And anything, you know, we can also ask the panel some of these same things to get some other perspectives. But
Okay.
I know, you know, that's a little bit specific. Maybe you could address some general things real quick.
Yep. So the question is just regarding, you know, grandparents are the current foster placement. They're concerned about dad who's in jail and what rights he would have. In any ICWA case, the department or whoever has removed the child has an obligation to provide active efforts to both parents to try to facilitate reunification. Certainly, if I mean, the department would have an obligation to work with the dad and to offer him a case plan and to see, you know, to see if he can make progress on that case plan and if he could be a resource for the law requires that, you know, that we work with both parents and try to see if they could parent the children. That being said, if if it's coming up on permanency and they're looking at, you know, transfer of custody or something to the grandparents, you know, I would say just keep in mind that if they're not terminating the mother's rights, they're likely also not terminating the father's rights. And so that might be something you do need to consider in the future is, you know, potentially working with him regarding visitation or parenting time. A lot of times fathers, you know, are non-custodial parents. And so really the rights are going from mom to, you know, to the proposed custodians. And, you know, the father may have never established paternity. I mean, a lot of that can be really specific on what this, you know, what the situation is. But if, you know, if they're going through with permanency, they, you know, they should be addressing father through that petition by, you know, having offered him a case plan. And then if they're transferring custody, they should be able to show that, you know, he's also not in a position to parent the kids.
Sorry about that. Well, I just want to say thank you both, Jacqueline and Shannon. You did a wonderful job, and we really appreciate you coming on tonight. And feel free to stay with us if you can, but if you can't, we understand. Just for all of you that are watching, again, my name is Laura Newton. And one thing I kind of neglected to do at the beginning is to just introduce that this webinar tonight is brought to you by the Metro Urban Indian Directors Family Preservation Subcommittee. So the subcommittee is a group of lots of awesome organizations, including folks from Hennepin and Ramsey County, the Indian Child Welfare Law Center, Minnesota Indian Women's Resource Center, Minneapolis American Indian Center, many of our tribes and urban offices, Ida Young Center in St. Paul. We have folks here from a number of different organizations, so we'll be introducing them in our panel. But I just wanted to thank you all. We are at the point of the evening where we're going to introduce our panel here. And so I'm pleased to introduce to you, I'm going to just kind of go down the line. We have folks from a number of different areas. We've got people here that are foster parents, parents that have experienced the child welfare system, professionals in the child protection system, folks that work with parents daily, and tribal professionals as well. So we're excited to get to answer some questions here. And so I'm going to start with Shauna King, who is a parent mentor, and I'm glad that she's here with us tonight. And if you'd like to just introduce yourself as well.
Dosha meets Madaka Behobomia means Shauna King. Hello, my name is Holy Owl Woman. My English given name is Shauna King, and I work as a parent mentor at the ICWA Law Center. I am a mom who aged out of foster care and in turn had experienced the system as a birth parent and had my kids put in foster care, had to work a case plan and successfully reunified. So now my job is to kind of hold hands with parents that are currently going through this system I represent Minnesota on a national level as the birth parent advocate for Casey Family Programs. So I'm very glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, I'd like to introduce Kathy McCormick, who is a foster parent that's with us tonight. Kathy, if you'd like to also say anything to the group. Oops, we do got to unmute you.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
I got kids in the house, so I keep on muting it so nobody can hear me. My name is Kathy. I am a foster parent of an ICWA child that we're currently adopting. My family is from the White Earth Nation, the White Earth Ojibwe Nation. I'm also a foster parent that was in foster care in the ICWA system. So that's about it right now.
Thank you so much. Next, I'd like to introduce October Allen. October, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do in your role?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Laura. Hello, everyone. I am super excited to be here. My name is October Allen. I'm from Duluth, and I grew up on the Leech Lake Indian Reservation in Cass Lake, Minnesota. I was taken out of the home at age 12. I never returned back to my mother's home. As an adult, I asked my mother why, and she said she didn't know that I could come home. So I'm very passionate about child protection and working with parents and families, helping them just attach to resources and giving them hope, knowing that their children can come home. As an adult myself, I went through a drug addiction and had my own child protection case and it took 3 years to be successfully reunified, and I was. And then I was nominated to a parent mentor program, and for the last 5 years, I've been working side by side, peer-to-peer with families. I've been very successful, specializing in Indian child welfare in Duluth, so much that I extended my services to Carleton County. And in conjunction with that, I also became a housing support provider for St. Louis County. I house and support women coming into homes and helping them rebuild their lives. I just opened my 6th home for women, and just tonight I housed a woman with a current Indian child welfare case, and her baby will be coming here on Monday. So I'm super excited to share all that I have learned in the passion that I have in letting people know that there is hope, there is help, and super excited to be here and learn from you all also.
Thank you so much, October. That's a great start to our evening here to hear that wonderful story of reunification. Next up, we have Kate Rickford, who works with Quality Parenting Initiative. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do and your role?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. My name is Kate Rickard, and as Laura said, I work and support the Quality Parenting Initiative efforts here in Minnesota. And really what that looks at is how do we transform the child welfare system to wrap around kids and families. We know that all kids deserve to have excellent caregiving. And so if a child has to be out of their parents' home, how do we ensure that they are at a place that understands who they are and has connection to their families? And so part of our efforts is really to look at how do we build healthy and successful relationships between the families. So the family of origin and then who is caring for the child at the time. QPI does some other stuff, but I'd say that's one of the bigger pieces that I'm passionate about in the work that we do. Thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to go to Mark Costello, who is a supervisor at Ramsey County. If you could also tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Hi, good evening. As Laura said, Mark Costello, I supervise the one ICWA unit in Ramsey County in child protection. I've been doing that. I've been a supervisor for about 6 years. I've been a worker since, started in South Dakota in 1998. So I just aged myself. and I love the work. I'm very passionate about it. So I'm very honored to be here to answer any questions that anyone would have. Thanks.
Okay, next up we have Brandon Elkire, who works in the family court system. If you could also tell us a little bit about you tonight, that would be great.
Hello, thank you for having me. My name is Brandon Elkire. I am the director for the Justice for Families program, which is housed in the Family Justice Center. My job is to look at the system as a whole and look to see where there may be gaps that can be filled, gaps in access and gaps in court systems that might not favor disenfranchised groups of people. So my entire job is to look at access and help create access for people. There's a particular focus within our grant to work with Native American communities. I myself am a citizen of Standing Rock Sioux Tribe, a very proud citizen, and this is very passionate work to me. So thank you again for having me.
Miigwech, thank you also, Brandon. Next, I'd like to introduce Lucy Favorite, who is the Executive Director at American Indian Family and Children's Services.
Hi, Laura. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here tonight. As Laura said, my name is Lucy Favorite. I'm an enrolled member of the White Earth Reservation. I am the Executive Director of American Indian Family and Children's Services. We are a nonprofit foster care agency. We're located over in St. Paul, Minnesota. As a nonprofit, we can license in all 87 counties. So we have foster homes that are located throughout the state. I also, as an attendee, I do have one of my foster care licensing workers with me, Sabrina Batalden. So if she has any questions or any feedback, she'll either put it in the chat or she'll get a hold of me. But the other thing that I wanted to tell you is that I grew up with foster care. So my mom and dad did foster care, and I'm probably going to age myself, but they did foster care before you were paid for it. And my mother said that she was always told that she always got Indian children, and that's where I get my Indian blood from, is my mother. She said I was always told that these Indian children were behavior problems. And she said I'd get them to my house, and she said I never had any problems. So I grew up with it, and then I am a former foster parent, and my situation was that I took in some relatives. So I'm happy to be here tonight.
Thank you, Lucy.
Yep.
I believe next is a longtime foster parent, Mike Sinnett. Welcome, thank you. If you'd like to say anything?
I was just checking everybody out, checking everybody's stories out. We represent the Omaha Ponca tribes and the Ojibwe tribes in my household. So we have multiple tribes in our household. We for all the foster parents and people that want to do foster parents, we've graduated 21 kids now from high school over our 25 years, me and my wife, Lucy. So yeah, keep it going, keep it strong. Everybody out there working with Indigenous people, and together we can probably turn this around here in Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you. So what we're going to do next, just to let you know, if those of you who might have joined us a little bit later too, again, I'm Laura Newton, so I'm moderating the panel this evening. I'm going to do my best to also keep an eye on the chat, but there's other folks behind the scenes here who are watching that as well. So if you don't get your question answered right away, we will do our best to get to it. I'm so thankful for all of you being here. If there is, panelists, if there is a question that that you would particularly like to answer, you can certainly raise your hand and I will make sure to call on you. Otherwise, we'll kind of just go through the questions. One of the first questions that I have is about really just your experience with working with families that have gone through the process of, you know, maybe having a transfer of legal custody, or if you have had that experience yourself or helped families. If there's just anything that you would like to say about that process that you think is important for people to know. And I'm going to start with Shauna. And if you don't have anything to say, you can certainly say pass.
I think, I didn't have transfer of legal custody in my case. I do know that I aged out of foster care as a youth. But I do know that, ICWA wasn't involved as a youth, but it was involved as a parent. And I think it's because of lack of knowledge in North Dakota's part. I'm a citizen of Fort Berthold Indian Reservation, and I grew up in Fargo, North Dakota. And I honestly don't think that they had enough education to understand that they needed to see if ICWA even applied. But when it comes to that, working with my moms and dads at the ICWA, at the Indian Child Welfare Law Center, it's important to ask your attorneys what your rights are. And it's important to understand that this isn't an end all. It's important to understand that you have rights and that you can have visitation and what that looks like. What does it look like if the family that you transferred, it could be mom, could be a foster parent. If you transfer your rights over and that it's no longer working, what can you do? So being able to understand that and being able to have a person that you can go to, when you transfer your rights over, it might look different in 3 years. So what does that look like for you? And what are your rights? And what are external, family's rights, like including, how like my cousins are kind of my sisters, they're not really my cousins. What does that look like for everybody else? We don't have that colonized virgin and Indian country of our family. So making sure that we can understand that, and the foster parents understand that when they're coming into this too. You don't want to surprise foster parents or anybody else with like, oh, well, now this is what I think. If you have those understandings and you can talk to your attorney about what is important to you, what's important to your family, and what you want to keep as a basic structure for visitation, holidays, just anything that you want. Schools, if you want to change names, switch schools, cut your hair, and siblings, if the siblings aren't all together. So I think those are important. I think you should always, always, always talk to your attorney. And of course I work at the law center, so that's what I would say. But it's so true.
Great, thank you, Shauna. October, would you like to answer that? Just anything you'd like to talk to regarding about transfer legal custody, or just anything that you would like to say regarding like a transfer of custody or adoption or anything that's been your experience.
Okay, I know in my own experience, I had 2 child protection cases. One of them was a legal transfer of custody, and it was to my brother. And that was actually a blessing because it helped take the burden off of the child protection case and the requirements and the court order obligations that I had. And it built that bridge into co-parenting with my brother and restoring that relationship and making room to make amends within the family unit. That because of my drug addiction, I needed to do that. And my children, it was nice for them to see that rebuilding of that family network. But when working with families, I work traditional and Indian child welfare cases, and the ICWA cases, I always tell them that they have time. They have time to make decisions, and I ask them who is the court recommending, or who is the social worker recommending that the custody transfer to. And I always ask and mediate between the parent and the social worker, what are the options? What are other solutions, so that the parent can be well informed as to what the options are, what is the expectation, and what does the future look like. And that helps the parent and making better informed decisions, so that in the event there is a transfer of custody, they have more peace and closure with that decision. And I know, like with adoptions, there can be that contract agreement. You know, it's nice to be able to tell the parents that this would be a more informal agreement with that transfer of custody. I'm always opposed to when the court wants to do it too soon, because that doesn't give the parent that much time to work their case plan or go to treatment. You know, sometimes it takes 2, 3, 4, 5 times to go to treatment. But I do believe with the right support, the right understanding, education, and mentorship for the parent in understanding what transfer of legal custody means, that's imperative to their health and their well-being in walking forward in their relationship with their child. Because that, to me, I view it, my experience is that transfer of legal custody can be a good thing. If it's appropriate, right? Many times I've seen it where it's not. It's absolutely not appropriate, and it creates more trauma for the parent. And because of their lack of understanding and the attorneys and social workers' ability to explain it to them, they go along their life thinking that their rights have been terminated, there is no hope for reunification, and they don't try to establish that parent-child relationship because they think it's over with. So those are my thoughts when it comes to transfer of legal custody.
Thank you so much. All wonderful information. Next, I'm going to ask Kate, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
I think a really big piece that we don't always talk about is the courage to ask questions, to ask for what your needs are, to advocate. And so, you know, I think about in these situations, there's a lot that goes into it, and sometimes we don't have people's perspectives, and it's not out of, you know, ill will or misintention. I mean, maybe sometimes it is, but I think more often it's, you know, this is kind of the framework I'm coming from. And so the more that we can have families talk about, like, what is it that I'm really needing, and here's where I'm coming from, the better other people are going to be able to meet that. So I also work at a private foster care agency, you know, similar to Lucy. And so we've supported some families in that work, mostly non-relative situations, but, you know, just encouraging families to, like, use your voice and share, because that courage is really, really important for your kids and for the parents themselves.
Thank you so much. Mark, would you like to add anything?
Not too much, except that remember, we also transfer custodies to fathers. You know, we in Ramsey County, we do. At one point, we were the #1 state of the 87 county, or state, #1 county of the 87 counties in Minnesota to license relatives and place kids with relatives. Now, we're also working on not placing children out of the home anyway, but if we have to, we place with relatives, and we're really proud of that. But we also don't forget about fathers. As Jacqueline said, a lot of fathers are non-custodial, so they don't have those legal rights unless, you know, they happen to be married to the mother. So we work very hard on, if can't be reunified with mother, we work with fathers, and we transfer custody to fathers. Now, they don't get the North Star benefits, but it's special when we can do that too. So don't forget about the fathers.
I so much agree. I think that, yep, that sometimes happens, and we've got to remember dads as well. Brandon, would you like to add anything?
I don't have anything to add.
Okay, I know lots of people have said great things. So, Lucy?
I would just like to say I appreciate the discussion that is going on, and I appreciate hearing from everybody. And I know, like Kate just shared, that she's from an agency that provides foster care. So for some of the people that are on here, one thing is that we network, but the other thing is that Kate and I are sitting on the other, kind of like the other side of the fence, because we're placing children after a child protection case has opened up. And one thing that I've known Kate for a couple of years now, and one of the things that AFAX has always done, and I can tell you this because I'm a former foster parent and I was actually licensed through AFAX, is that, and actually this little tidbit, Laura Newton was my licensing worker. So I've known Laura for 20 some years. But anyhow, we are always supportive of the relationship with biological family. And Shauna, you hit on it just a minute ago here in saying that it's difficult to try to explain to somebody that is non-Indian. My kids call my best friend auntie, and it's not blood relation. And I know of people, my kids and their cousins they're not necessarily cousins, they introduce each other as siblings, you know, so it's understanding that relationship. In any matter, I am supportive in having the child or children have a relationship with their biological families. And I think it's important, and that's why we're here. Sometimes that's not always possible, but we still support it. And the good thing is when you do have somebody that is working a plan and that can continue to communicate and see their children, that I think it's going to be positive all the way around. I do want to give a shout out though to Mark. I've known Mark for years, and he and his team have actually been very supportive in the families that we've had. And recent transfer of legal custody that we did, everything was lined up beautifully. So there was support there for the biological family, and there was the support there for the foster family. And I don't think it could have gone off better. And with that said, I would like to say that I think that there's a lot of, I don't know for the people that are on here, whether you're a panelist or an attendee, it's intimidating to have to go to court. And it's intimidating to have to go to court, even, you know what, even if you just, I got a parking ticket one time and didn't pay it. And I'm going to tell you, I wound up in front of a judge, and I wound up in front of a judge that was not happy. And we've talked at the mini MUID meeting, the subcommittee, about, and this has been ongoing, but having a handout for parents. Because I'm going to tell you, I'm a person, not applying this to my day job, but actually off to the right of me here, I have a pile of mail I haven't gone through. You know, so when you get something, if you're standing in court and they hand you something, do you read through it? And one of the things that we encourage our parents to do, by all means, run it by us. But one of the things that we encourage our parents to do is read everything that you get, read everything that you're signing, read the back. I have a parent that came to me one time that went through a diversion program, and by signing the front of it, if you turned around and read the back, she was admitting to guilt. And, you know, and read the fine print. I, earlier this year, had a conversation with Jill Esch because I'm concerned over my foster parents not being properly notified or properly educated about what takes place with TLC and adoption. And one of the things that I wanted to say, and I should have said this when I introduced myself, the two foster parents that are on here, so Kathy McCormick and then Mike Sinnett, I did see Lucy in the back, so Lucy Sinnett, Mike and Lucy Sinnett, they're both foster parents with AFAX. And I'm extremely honored to work with them. I'm continually impressed with the work that Mike and Lucy have done with the children that have been in their home, and they're supportive. I've been over when they've had biological family members over. And one of the things that I've heard consistently through tonight is making sure that it's safe. And sometimes it's not safe, but I appreciate our families that do have that connection. Kathy McCormick is the other one that's on the panel tonight here, and she's one of our foster parents, and she's in the process of adopting a young lady, and I'm impressed with the work that she does. So with that said, I just appreciate seeing everybody's face here. I wish that we were all in a space that we could be together, but it's about networking and moving forward. So thank you for listening to me, and I'm really glad that we're doing this.
Thank you, Lucy. I'm going to go to Kathy next, and then Mike, both of whom are foster parents currently, and I know have some experience, you know, working with biological parents or perhaps relatives. So just asking a little bit about your experience, if you have gone through a transfer of legal custody or adoption, and what your experience has been with that.
Hello. Actually, I've never gone through a transfer of custody. My daughter, who I've had for 5 years, is had her rights, parents' rights were terminated at birth. We're going through a tribal adoption, which is so much fun. But my thing with it is, one thing that was interesting is when we started the paperwork for the adoption, the Leech Lake social worker made it very clear, and I already knew, but he was very clear that with an ICWA adoption, we have to be open to visits from family members. So even though birth parents are not in the picture, just within the last couple of years, she was introduced to bio mom's birth mother's family, and we have tried to keep that contact, but like you said, sometimes it's always not in the like other people have said, sometimes it's not always in the best situation. So we have to look to see how their family is doing because of other circumstances, and how our daughter is doing emotionally and mentally as well with when the visits happen. So even though termination has been done in this point, we still do have contact with the biological family on their side. Not with birth mom or birth dad, birth mother's deceased, but all the rest. So that's really all I have on it.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for your experience. Mike, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, it's kind of one of the difficult parts of fostering is when the biological mother or dad want to come over or want to see the kids, or contacting the workers to make sure it's safe for the kids to go anywhere. Then the emotional roller coaster the kids are on. They come back with a bio mom or the bio grandma. It is heartbreaking, and it is emotional most of the time, because they'll come in, we'll see them for a week, then we won't see them for 10 months, and then we'll see them for a week, and we'll see them for a day, and then we won't hear nothing for another year. So that's one of the hardest roller coaster rides as a foster parent you have to do. We have done long-term adoption. We've done guardianship. We've done everything pretty much under the realm of foster care. And our biggest goal is just to have the kids graduate and feeling safe. And I know everybody's touching base on the safety of kids. We took over guardianship of a kid through foster care. We still have him. We're gonna have him until he. We did go through the adoption, and the siblings want to come over and see him all the time. And Lucy touched base on this already, and we do welcome in our house. And we did have the oldest brother in foster care. I think he's 35 years old now. And we continue to work with the family as they struggle through life, and wanting to see their brother. We're doing Uber rides or Zoom to get him over here to see him, just to make it the transition smoother. But it is emotional for the kids as well as the parents. We feel for the parents too. Sometimes parents just aren't ready to have their kids back. I want to say a big shout out to Mark though, talking about the fathers. We rarely see fathers come into pictures that are not working with the kids anymore or not being with their children. And I think that's where the fathers in Minnesota here got to step up and start being involved in the kids' lives, because kids they're hurting, and we like to see more interactions for the kids, especially we do older boys. We've been working with Lucy for a long time, and a lot of time the older boys, they really have a chip on their shoulders because they don't have a male role model, and they've been through so many placements throughout their lives, sometimes we get a kid at 15 and 16 that have been in, multiple placements, maybe 10 to 12, maybe even 20 placements, since they've been 8 or 9 years old. So that's a tough come up for a kid to try to be positive and then try to graduate high school and try to be productive in the community. So that's one thing I hope that we can really start striving for, is getting positive male role models, and especially in foster care. Because if they can see positive males out there doing stuff, and of course we work with a lot of boys that they can obtain anything they want to do. They can make their goals. So that's the foster parent roller coaster rides that I have to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike, and thank you both Kathy and Mike for your service as foster parents. I know that you are making a difference for kids, and we always really appreciate that. I think the next question that I have, we've had a couple of different questions about grandparents' rights, and so I'm going to kind of combine that a little bit, and then I just ask our panelists to either raise their hand, or you could just wave at me too, if you would like to answer this question, because we won't have time to have everyone answer. But I would like to just ask folks, if there is a transfer of legal custody that is going to occur, and grandparents are really concerned that they will then not have contact after that happens. What has been your experience in that? What is there any advice that you would give, or any I guess kind of instructions on who you would lead grandparents to for some assistance? And I would just like to add here, because I know one of our tribal workers had to step out, that one of the things with that is that anytime a transfer of legal custody is going to happen in court, you can always ask your tribal representative to talk about what the grandparents' connection could be going on down the line. There are things that can be put in place, such as contact agreements and those types of things that can help along the line. And I know that tribes really support that, so it's always worth asking your tribal representative for assistance. If anyone wants to take and answer that question, or have anything to comment about grandparents' rights? No one wants to answer. Let's see here. Maybe if you don't mind, Brandon, I might ask you if you ever see cases come in to the family justice system regarding like grandparents' rights or visitation.
Again, so my role is not to look at like individual courtrooms. So I can't answer that. I don't ever observe the cases that actually come through. I'm more on the back end of what we're seeing as far as statistics. So, but I would like to add a few pieces, because I've also received custody of three boys now from our tribe, and we did it through the tribal court system. And it was so seamless, and it was so such a positive experience for not just me, but my sons, because they didn't have to go through this onslaught of, so in hearing what's happening here, it seems like I have had a very different experience than what is like the norm maybe. So I just want to put that out there, that there is a different, it appears that there might be various ways about getting transference of custody that might not be so rigorous or daunting in doing it through maybe a state system. Again, there's a lot of variables that have to go into play there. We're all from the same tribe, we're from the same family. So it just worked out in a very, very positive way. We didn't have to come to a written agreement about visitation. It was an understanding that we made. Again, assuming both parties are of somewhat reliable character. But it worked out for us, and I look at more of it. I look at it as more of an investment into them, not just like financially, but emotionally. I refer to them as my sons, and it's viewed and accepted within our tribe as such. So it's a very different experience than hearing what I'm hearing today. So I really appreciate everybody sharing your stories. It's very like illuminating for me. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Brandon. Does anyone else have anything that they want to say about grandparents or grandparents having contact throughout a case? I know that those are questions that we get a lot. Mark, where would you maybe lead a grandparent that just has questions about visitation? Who could they talk to?
They could always reach out to the social worker if they knew who that is. However, there's only certain things that we can share about the case with that grandparent if the parent that we're working with has not already like signed permission or signed releases for us to talk to them. So we can't just share anything. However, with that said, I would encourage like my workers to reach out to grandparents or any family member for that matter. And Jackie put a little note in the chat about legal rights, and I'm not an attorney, but she did answer one of those questions about the legal rights. However, a family group decision-making meeting is something that we use, and we get all the family members together, including grandparents. From a safety plan meeting to a case planning meeting to how are we going to support reunification? There's a variety of things we can do with family group meetings, and we can hash out some of this stuff. We can talk about visitation because, listen, we're best interest, and we have a bunch of adults that they may not get along with each other, but they have to put that aside because we're talking about what's best for the kids. So, there's a lot of disagreements in families, and so we do have these family group meetings to try to again, we talk that we need to put this stuff aside, and this is what's best for the kids. And if visitation with a grandparent is best for the kids, then that's something that we should really do. I mean, that's kind of all I have to say about that, but we try our best to get everybody involved.
Right. Thank you so much for that. I think next that have been asked in the chat, some of them are more specific, and I don't want to say too many specifics because I don't, this is being recorded and I want to be careful to be confidential, but we do have a question about a father's involvement and regarding like grandparents that have that are caring for a grandchild, and their daughter is the mom of the child, and then the father is, has not had as much contact and has been incarcerated during the case. They have concerns with the, that they're looking at going forward with a permanency or a transfer of custody. Does anyone have any advice or anything that they would offer that family? And if not, or if you want to just raise your hand, then I can know that you want to answer. Shauna, did you want to answer?
Well, I mean, I'm 100% supportive of fathers' rights. And working at the Law Center, we have a huge representation of moms. And unfortunately, when it comes to child protection, fathers are usually the afterthought when moms aren't doing it and they have this really short time period to finish out a case plan. Then we're going to do that extenuating search for dad. and they don't have as much time to do what they need to do. But dads have just as much rights as mom, and they also should get an attorney, and they should be provided the same active efforts as mom and the same support services. I definitely believe in father's rights. I think that, a child has two parents. So I'm really 100% in support of fathers. I hate seeing a child going into foster care that has a dad that's ready and willing to do services that's just not looked at or found. And I've had several cases where I have been so disappointed because dad has been involved the entire time and mom has fallen off. And then once mom comes back, mom's going to be the person that the child's returning to, even though dad's been there way longer. And fortunately enough, I'm thinking of one particular dad who was very understanding and said, hey, listen, if this is what the county thinks is the best place for my daughter, even though I don't have a mental health issue, I don't have any addiction issues, it's just that my house has a 1-bedroom and they don't think my daughter should return to me because I have a 1-bedroom. And dad shouldn't live with a daughter in a 1-bedroom. Plus she had some high specific special needs, but the tribe was not helping him develop into this. They weren't providing the education, they weren't providing the assistance to get him to learn these things. He was more than willing to show up. So I was very disappointed, but he was so much more understanding, and him and the mother of their child, they are co-parenting together. So I'm very proud of him. But that's horrible. Like, fathers' rights just are not looked at. And unfortunately, sometimes moms are the doorways to dads, or how do we get to them? So it's unfortunate that we have that, but I think that if we can get to a system of a child well-being space instead of a child welfare space, where we're thinking about the well-being of this child, we can consider dads that to be more in the picture. I think I could go on and on and on. I'm frustrated with the child support. If they're on welfare, they're taking away every single child support dollars into the mom's, taking out of the mom's child welfare. It's just horrible. So all around, even with women, with children, that wasn't even made for dad. So everything, it's changed now, but everything that we can do in our system to help surround ourselves with a family instead of just like, moms, single moms, a child, I think needs to change. We need to definitely involve fathers more. So I'm sorry I got off my little tangent there, but I definitely think that fathers need to be involved in day one. And I don't think it's that they don't want to be. I just think they just don't know.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything they would like to add to that question? Any of our panelists? Okay.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mark.
I was just gonna. I obviously have a passion for this too, but I would also say, we try to find dads, because it's not always that the moms will tell us who the dads are, so we have to kind of search if there's like an unknown dad or something. So we try to do a really good diligent search on who that is and find that out. But the thing, it's finding the father and working with the father, but also the father's family, because there's a family there on the other side that can be a resource as well for the children. So that's important too. I was going to say something else, but I forgot because I'm old and it's kind of getting my bedtime.
One of the other things that were brought up, so we don't have her on the panel tonight, but she is helping answer some questions in the chat. Our ombudsperson for American Indian Families, Jill Esch, certainly is a person that anyone can go to ask some questions. She has a wealth of resources. The great thing about having all of these folks on the panel tonight is if you want to get a hold of anyone, you certainly, we have anyone that's come into the Zoom, we have your contact information, I think, for most of you. If you want to make sure to be in touch with someone that you've heard speak here tonight, feel free now to ask for their information. And we've shared a few times people's, email or work phone number if you wanted to contact them about something more specific, because I know it's always hard to get to quite everything in a short amount of time. One of the other things I wanted to ask, especially maybe for foster parents or really for everyone, is I guess what do you see as kind of like some of the best practices or the best ways of connecting parents, foster parents, grandparents? What have been some of your experiences with that, or do you have any suggestions for families? Who would like to answer? You guys are gonna make it this hard on me. I'm gonna have to call on people. Kathy,
I'll
would you
just
like to
say
go?
something real quick. I don't have as much experience because I got licensed for foster care for my specific daughter. I do respite foster care for other foster homes, so I have them on short-term basis. But my daughter has 4 biological sisters in other foster homes. You see it very rarely when siblings are separated, but they were all separated for very good reasons. And we try to keep the communication open between all of them. There's different reasons, and unless you're a foster parent and see a child that has high mental health needs on a daily basis, sometimes having the contact be every single day is not good for the children. Each child is different. With my daughter, she has to have contact with her sister every couple of weeks, and we have no issue with that, whether it's seeing them or talking to them. But even she knows, and mind you, she's almost 14, that if she's around them too much, she escalates and they escalate. So I think I can't remember the other foster parent's name, but he mentioned it too, it's a roller coaster of emotions when family members are involved, and we still do deal with it. We love our kids and we want the best for them, but it's really on a base-to-base basis. Same thing with the biological family. Visitations there, and I don't know if I'm even explaining this right, but we have to look at our children's mental health at the same time as the visitation is what my biggest thing, at least with my daughter. We do see siblings. It's usually every couple of weeks to a month or so, but they talk more frequently on the phone. And with COVID right now, I think that's the way it is with everybody. So that's my personal experience. I don't deal every once in a while I'll deal with visitation with a respite child, but that's very rare. And for those of you that don't know what respite is, just because I'm throwing the word out there, it's when a foster family needs a couple of days, whether they have a family emergency or they just need a few days to unwind themselves, that our kids are able to go somewhere else. So we are taking care of ourselves versus and not being able to have the mentality to take care of our children.
Great, thank you, Kathy. We are just about out of time here, which has gone so fast. We are almost at time, but if anyone had any last closing remarks that they wanted to add? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone that says they have something that they want to add. Oh, I guess, Shauna, do you?
I do. I think I just wanted to add that, you know, when we think about child welfare and transferring of legal custody, of having our children in out of home placement, and as a birth mom, you know, trusting somebody to take care of my child, I think we should always think that in best practices that we want to heal. As a family, I want to heal. When I had my kids placed in foster care, I didn't want to be an addict. I didn't want to be homeless. I didn't want to be in that space that I was. But what I needed was concrete supports. And whoever I'm leaving my child in care with, I hope that they could be a concrete support.
Thank you so much. There's been lots of wonderful panelists on here tonight. There is a lot of folks that have helped us behind the scenes today. So I want to thank Shauna King for being here, Kate Rickford, Mark Costello from Ramsey County, Brandon Elkire, Lucy Favorite, October Allen, Mariah Smith and Gary Smith, Shannon Smith, who presented earlier along with Jacqueline Bolio on the legal pieces of the transfer of legal custody. Kathy McCormick, one of our foster parents, and Mike Sinnett, one of our foster parents. Thank you both for being here. I'd like to also especially thank Sadie Hart, Barb Drew, and Keegan Flaherty. You didn't see any of them on screen. You certainly can come on now and wave, but these folks have all coordinated all of the stuff behind the scenes tonight, and we so appreciate all of that they have done. I'd also like to give a shout out to Jill Kehaloni-Esch, who has helped us moderate some of the questions. We are at time. I know that there might be more questions, but there are lots of email addresses here in the chat for you. So hopefully you've seen all of that. If for some reason you weren't able to grab something or write something down, you can go to the Minneapolis American Indian Center website and find my name, Laura Newton, and I will get your question to any of our panelists. You also should check out the Metro Urban Indian Directors Facebook page. It is a community networking page, and we are part of the Family Preservation Subcommittee. So we welcome your input to our committee, and if you would ever like to talk to any of us, that's a good way to reach folks as well. So I'd like to just say good night to everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in.